The war had consumed three-star systems when Alpha Thrin made the decision that would haunt him for cycles to come. His den world of Vakros burned behind him, the Krillian swarm spreading like a plague across its surface. Before him stood Captain Rin of the Human Expeditionary Forces, a species barely 2 centuries into galactic civilization, yet somehow holding the line where ancient empires had crumbled. "Take them," Thrin growled, pushing forward his 2 cubs. Koro, the eldest at barely 6 seasons, stood defiant despite the trembling in his limbs. His sister Mira pressed against him, her silver fur matted with ash. "I must lead the evacuation fleet. The elders, the young mothers, they need me." Captain Rin knelt, her worn exosuit hissing with the movement. Her eyes, those strange, forward-facing predator eyes that had unnerved the galaxy when humans first emerged, met Thrin's without flinching. "You're asking us to babysit while you fly into a war zone. I'm asking you to keep them alive," Thrin said, his voice breaking on the last word. "Your kind survived the burning of Terra. Your children grew up in bunkers and learned to fight before they learned to read. If anyone can protect my cubs through this." He couldn't finish. Rin stood slowly, glancing at her squad. Sergeant Hayes adjusted his rifle strap, his scarred face impassive. Corporal Chin simply nodded. They'd all lost family to the Krillians. They understood. "How long?" Rin asked. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. Just until we establish a safe zone in the outer reaches. It took 6 months. Koro would never forget his first night in the human camp. The soldiers didn't coddle them. They gave the cubs ration packs, dense, flavorless blocks that tasted like recycled hull plating, and blankets that smelled of chemical fire retardant. But when Mira whimpered in her sleep, Corporal Chin sat beside her cot and hummed something low and rhythmic until she quieted. "What is that sound?" Koro asked, his translator struggling with the melodic pattern. "A lullaby," Chin said softly. "My grandmother sang it during the siege of New Beijing. 47 days in the dark, with the enemy outside and no promise of dawn." She smiled sadly. But the dawn came. Captain Rin trained them because there was no alternative. The Krillians pushed closer each day, and every soldier was needed on the front lines. She couldn't spare anyone to watch cubs. "Hold it like this," Rin demonstrated, pressing a training rifle into Koro's hands. "Humans aren't the strongest species, Koro. We're not the fastest. Half the galaxy can see better, hear better, smell better than us." She adjusted his stance, her movements precise. "But we adapt. We learn. We survive." Koro's people were hunters, apex predators on their world. But they hunted with fang and claw, not with tactics and tools. Rin taught him to think like prey that became predator, to use cover, to strike from unexpected angles, to turn weakness into advantage. "Why do you fight like cowards?" Koro demanded one day, frustrated after another drill in camouflage and misdirection that Rin's laugh was sharp. "Cowards? Kid, humans went to war with sticks and rocks against animals with fangs like swords. We climbed to the top of our food chain by being too stubborn to die and too smart to fight fair." She tapped his forehead. "Pride gets you killed. Victory keeps you alive." Mira learned different lessons. Sergeant Hayes, who'd been a field medic before the war consumed all distinctions, taught her triage and trauma care. "Little one, every species bleeds," he said, his hands steady as he demonstrated pressure points on a training dummy. "And every species can be saved if you're fast enough and brave enough." She proved him right when a Krillian scout breached the perimeter. Hayes went down with acid burns across his chest, and 8-year-old Mira dragged him to cover while Koro, following Rin's training, flanked the creature and put 3 rounds into its neural cluster. When reinforcements arrived, they found 2 cubs standing over a dead enemy and a wounded sergeant who was alive because a child refused to let him die. The message reached them in the 4th month. Alpha Thrin was leading a desperate counteroffensive. No safe zones had been established. The Krillians had adapted, evolved. The war had become an extinction event. "We're pulling back to the core worlds," came the orders from Human Command. "Evacuate all non-combatants." Captain Rin looked at Koro and Mira, who stood with her squad as if they'd always been there. Koro wore a modified exosuit, his rifle maintained with religious care. Mira had Hayes' medic insignia stitched onto her vest, a gift he'd insisted on after she'd saved 3 more soldiers during a supply run ambush. Non-combatants, Rin repeated slowly. Anyone here fit that description? Koro's predator eyes, so much like Rin's now in their calculating intensity, met hers. No, Captain. They didn't evacuate. They advanced. When Alpha Thrin's fleet finally broke through the Krillian blockade, they expected to find refugee camps and mass graves. Instead, they found a fortified position broadcasting human tactical signals alongside Vakrosian din markers. The Alpha descended in the first wave, his heart hammering with hope and dread. He found his cubs on the command platform. Koro stood beside Captain Rin, coordinating artillery strikes with the casual efficiency of a veteran officer. His fur bore scars now, and his eyes carried weight that no 6-month absence could explain. Mira moved through the medical tents with Sergeant Hayes, her hand steady as she sealed a plasma burn on a human soldier's arm. "Father," Koro said, his voice deeper than Thren remembered. Not a cub's voice. Not anymore. Thren's warriors fanned out behind him, staring in confusion at the sight before them. 200 human soldiers stood in formation, but interspersed among them were Vakrosian survivors, dinless refugees who should have been helpless civilians. They carried rifles. They wore armor. They moved like pack hunters. "What have you done to my cubs?" Thren whispered. Captain Rin stepped forward, her scarred face impassive. "We kept them alive. Like you asked." She paused. "They kept us alive too. Fair trade, I'd say." "We learned, Father," Koro said, approaching with Mira at his side. "The humans taught us that survival isn't about being the strongest. It's about being the most stubborn." His lip curled in an expression caught between a snarl and a smile. "Turns out we're quick learners." Mira held up her hands, stained with blood and healing gel. "And we taught them about pack loyalty, about protecting the wounded, about never leaving anyone behind." Her voice hardened. "The Krillians are learning that lesson now." Alpha Thren looked past his cubs to the mixed battalion behind them, human and Vakrosian, standing together, scarred and unbroken. He'd left his children with strangers because he had no choice. They'd returned leading a family forged in fire. "The Krillians are regrouping near the dead moons," Koro reported, his tone crisp and professional. "Captain Rin believes we can cut off their supply lines if we strike within 48 hours. "I agree." He met his father's eyes without hesitation. "We need your fleet, Alpha. Will you fight with us?" Thren looked at his son, at the soldier wearing his cub's face, and felt pride war with sorrow. Then he looked at Captain Rin, this human who transformed refugees into warriors. "Humanity, fuck yeah," he said, mangling the human phrase Koro had taught him. Rin's smile was fierce. "Close enough, Alpha. Close enough." The battalion moved out at